Welcome to the future of payroll and workforce management insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, one of the podcasts here at HR.com, where I am Executive Community Leader of the Future of Payroll online community. Enough about me. My guest today is Yutaka Takagi. Welcome, Yutaka.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brent.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and you're with isolved, and we had a great opportunity recently to meet IRL, as the Gen Z and Gen Alpha like to say. We're a little bit older than that, which is short for in real life. There's a hashtag in front of that. But in any event, we had an opportunity to meet IRL again at the Payroll Congress back in Orlando in May, and we had some interesting conversations around the employee experience and how payroll can have a more sort of intentional, positive impact on it today versus in the past. And I can't wait to get to that. But first, as I like to start all of the podcast episodes with, I like to kind of get into your brain a little bit, like share it for our audience. What what galvanizes you? What really sort of gets your blood pumping? What are you passionate about when it comes to the world of work? Because most people in this space, they really have that passion. So share away.
Oh, man, I think back, I think about my career and just sort of, my background. And I think at the core of it, I'm like as I introduce myself sometimes in my talks, um, I'm a social sciences nerd at heart, like I got my degree in economics, right? And sort of being a Gen Xer, right? Sort of the age in which I've come of age here, right? Of this curiosity towards uh, the social aspects of what makes the world tick, right? Combined with the technology that the waves of technology that we've gotten to experience over these last decades, combined with business, right? So if I kind of imagine this Venn diagram of business, technology, and sort of people, social science, right? That overlap, I mean, is perfect. The perfect fit for this space of HR and payroll technology and sort of people technology. And and so that's kind of been sort of the focal point with which I've sort of spent my now almost 30 years in this space. When I started, I couldn't spell payroll, to be honest with you. My superpower was that I knew both Windows and DOS, so I could so I could go install software, right, in people's desktops. But eventually I started to learn about sort of the ins and outs of payroll and ins and outs of HR systems, and have managed to make a career of it. So that's kind of what keeps me going, is sort of occupying that space of seeing where the technology is moving, see where business is moving, see where people move, and really kind of try to keep in that center of that Venn diagram.
Oh, that I love the Venn diagram idea, and by the way, also Gen X here. Also Gen X. We're finally kind of having our day a little bit, which is nice. Took a long time, man, but
Right.
long overdue. But just you mentioned DOS, and some people listening might not even know what DOS is. It's those old green screens you saw, those old style computer screens, and might have seen in some TV show about the '80s or maybe the '90s. That's what DOS is, and that's a great superpower. I wish I shared that superpower. I've not implemented a payroll system myself myself. If I had to do it all over again, this might sound crazy, but that's I might actually install a payroll system. That's probably something that'd be useful. So, to bring that kind of legacy wisdom to what you do now, Yutaka, is really, really important. And also the economics and social aspect of it. I share your interest in sort of in those areas, and I think there's a lot to be said, and a lot of it is really applicable to when we talk about, this is a great segue, thank you for providing it, when we talk about the employee experience, right, and payroll, right, which is what we're going to talk about today. And just to kind of like set the table here, I'm going to share with you and the audience sort of a pet. I don't think it's a hypothesis. I think it's real. I think it's more than a hypothesis. But you know, in my opinion, payroll is at the very center. It's ground zero for the employee experience. It's just, the vast majority of people, we work for all sorts of reasons, but most people, the vast majority of people do not have the luxury to work without getting paid. And so that's just fundamental. It's table stakes. And it's always had a visceral effect on the employee experience, but it's usually been sort of this negative thing. Like when payroll goes right, nobody's really thinks about it or and engages with it. But when it goes wrong, oh man, I mean, listen, there's going to be just an inundation of calls at the payroll department. You have an employee mutiny on your hands potentially. It's certainly a retention issue, right? It's a morale craters. So it's not a stretch to say that payroll is ground zero for the employee experience. But today, what's really exciting today is that we have some sort of emerging technologies and emerging new attitudes about pay that are enabling have been sort of the how do you put it, the they've ignited ideas around how do we affect or impact pay employee experience in a positive way, in a conscious positive way among the employees, right? By getting and not necessarily by getting payroll right, but doing all sorts of other things. And there's all sorts of advances in the market, like pay cards, and you have EWA and all these sorts of things, and AI and stuff. And we're getting into that. So and there's a regulatory framework that's around this too. So let's get into this. What is your take on payroll's effect on the employee experience? And I hope I didn't steal your thunder there, because I know you have a lot to add. But what is your take, like your reaction to that whole idea?
Well, I think that's spot on, Brent. I mean, so here at isolved, we do a lot of research, surveying sort of various sort of constituencies all the time. One of the ones that we've been doing consistently over the last 5 or so years is the voice of workforce, which is we go and survey 1,000 full-time workers here in the United States about their attitudes towards work and towards HR and processes, things that affect how they work. And one of the consistent sort of themes has been this idea that, right, that people see payroll as a sort of enormous, like a critical component to how they experience work. They see areas of opportunity there, and opportunity for improvement. These are employees do, right, in how they experience payroll. You mentioned a couple of those things, right, in terms of accuracy. Accuracy is always number one, right? If people find pay mistakes, right, and that might be because of some scheduling issue, it could be wherever the sort of the issue might be. If at the end of the week, 2 weeks, they get their pay stub and it's wrong, and particularly that they didn't get paid for the hours that they worked, right? They're missing overtime, missing hours, etc. Like that is one of the top things that could drive an employee to look for another opportunity. I mean, if that doesn't sort of prove your point about the centrality of payroll to the employee experience, I don't know what does, right? And
Right.
so when we think about it from a sort of certainly a service provider perspective, but just, I think about it from my lens of the social sciences nerd. All right. I think of that perspective that how important, right, ultimately pay is to each of us as employees. Um, it's what allows us to feed our families. It's what allows us to keep a roof over our heads. Right? If we think of sort of that Maslow's hierarchy of need, if we kind of go back to that old chestnut from freshman psychology class, like these are foundational things that we need as people, in order to feel secure, right? So just beyond food and air and water, like just beyond above that is that level of security, and pay is so critical to that. And so like I think about, right, well, what are the things that we can do to help employees understand their pay, see their pay, see their value, right, in what they receive, right, and take pride in the work that they do every day. Um, I think about that sort of aspect of connecting employee, the work they do with the pay they receive, and
Yeah.
how can we improve that experience, thus hopefully improving that employee experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I like that point that you made there around connecting the pay to the work they do. And that works probably in the other direction too, right? Right? So pay isn't just sort of a liability in the in accounting parlance, a liability as opposed to an asset, right? So it still is, but in terms of the conversation, the discussion, it's seen as much more than that, and that to me is also a big sort of contributing factor to this idea that it can be a positive, that it can be elevated in terms of its how it's uh, acknowledged or recognized or noticed. That's probably the word, right? Pay is this weird thing where it's the reason somebody's working, and it's um it's so fundamental to your ability as an organization to perpetuate, right? It's because you're paying people to do the work, and yet it's this thing that just recedes into the background, and nope. It's there. I think there's a default sort of uh, desire to just, not even a desire. There's a propensity to just kind of not think about it. So oh yeah, because it's money. Nobody wants. That's the other thing. People don't want. This is one of these things. You don't want necessarily talk about money, right? So, but if you kind of like lose those social mores a little bit, right? And just kind of, well, this is important. We need to talk about this. That's the first step. Absolutely, absolutely. So let's shift a little bit here, because there's sort of a newfangled sort of environment here where there's all sorts of stuff available to us today that we didn't necessarily have even 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. And it has to do with payments, the payment side of the equation, right? So you have payroll, and sort of the last mile is that disbursement where all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, gross to calc is figured out, time is calculated for wage workers and all this stuff. All the tax withholdings are correct, hopefully, right? And you hit the button, which is actually the last step in a long process, and then the disbursement happens, right? And there's all sorts of things. So there's a real sort of interesting sort of landscape that's emerged around pay disbursements over the last 10 years or so. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think for such a long time, I think, we've sort of focused on sort of that pay accuracy and calculation component, which I don't think we can sort of take for granted, right? It's always evolving as tax policies change, wage and labor law change, the way people work change, and where they work change. All those things have an impact on that. But you're absolutely right. Sort of the big change that we've seen over the course of the last 5, 10 years is that, right? Like, because what's been sort of stable, right, for certainly as long as I've been in the industry, is sort of direct deposit, right? So you got the direct deposit, and you got to a point where you didn't have to print deposit slips every 2 weeks anymore, right? You could receive it via, via a mobile app or website. So like that sort of innovation happened in, you know, call it late 90s, early 2000s. And then not much has changed in that, right? Other than sort of the ability to maybe split your direct deposit to like three different places or whatever it might be. But now, yeah, you're seeing this sort of this wave of innovation that, certainly I think coming in from so the fintech world in particular, right, to help people experience pay a little bit differently. Um, I mean, some of this is driven by, I think, again, sort of some of the economics, right, of people, living paycheck to paycheck. There's, statistics vary depending on where you go, but it is the most recent one I read was that only 40% of Americans can cover $1,000 unexpected emergency out of savings. So 60% would have to go into debt, right, in some fashion, or credit cards or other consumer loans, something like that, to cover $1,000 unexpected emergency. $1,000 today, I mean, that's a couple tires on your car, maybe even one tire on your car, depending on how big it is. I mean,
Exactly.
that's pretty sort of significant to understand sort of where people's sort of personal finances are. And so when we think about things like earned wage access that might help people, bridge that space between paychecks, so that they could cover something like that without having to get say, a loan or go into debt. Um, Something along those lines, I think what we're seeing is sort of that reaction, if you will, to that reality of, just a higher cost of living all around, and things of that nature that sort of lead us to to operate in that mode financially. But so then how can we, as employers, or how can we provide at least the option for employees to gain access to those funds early? I think, I mean, it's a supply and demand world, right? And I think so. What we're seeing are technologies and services around how do we bridge that gap in a way that is sort of not, say, it is, dare I say, predatory as, say, some of the, check cashing businesses were earlier, in 10, 15 years ago. To move away from sort of reliance on that kind of mode to how can we use technology in a way that helps employees be able to manage those sorts of financial gaps.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you bring up so many good points. It's really in terms of the disbursement side of things. Once the money is ready to be transacted to the individual employees, right? You're absolutely correct. There's been sort of a renaissance in that side of things with fintech and all sorts of things. You have pay cards. You have, this isn't so much pay fintech, but earned wage access, also on-demand pay, where you can get paid up to a certain point in time in the current payroll cycle before actual payroll disbursement happens. Of course, you get the rest at the end of that payroll cycle. These sorts of things. You also have new types of you have options for employees, the recipients of the pay, the
Mhm.
employees, right? They have options in terms of how, what do I want to receive the pay in? Do I want to receive it in, just, plain old vanilla USD or Canada or whatever it is, right? Or my, just plain Jane, my own country's currency, or do I want to receive some of it in crypto, or whatever? And that's starting to surface as well. Um, and so there's all sorts of choice, which is interesting. And once you create choice, there's engagement, right, for employees. But and that's all. That's a fascinating world. But just bringing it back a little bit to the payroll professional, and who may have a modern, very capable payroll technology in place. There's a lot of stuff happening in that camp, in that area domain of things that can help to increase engagement and to be of real service to the employee too, not just to the employer when it comes to processing payroll. And as with every podcast episode these days, AI comes into the conversation, right? And so maybe you could share with our listeners a little, our viewers, excuse me, we're a video right now. Um,
We are.
uh,
Yep.
I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, right? So anyway, um, maybe you could share with our audience, and put it that way, and how, what are some of those options or those possibilities that are available to them today as payroll professionals working in a payroll tech stack?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's sort of multiple layers to this, right? I think there is that aspect of technology that is being applied to that employee experience component of it, right? So you have AI sort of enabled tools around sort of financial wellness and understanding the person's cash flows so that we can anticipate. Oh well, hey, you're going to get paid this Friday, so that bill that you have that's not due till next Tuesday, we'll hold on to that, right? And then you'll get paid on Friday, and you'll have the cash flow to manage your way through, right? There's a lot of, I think, sort of financial wellness tools at that employee level that is AI enabled, that can understand sort of your tendencies, your trends, your spending habits, and recommend sort of better financial hygiene to help that employee. And then on the sort of payroll side, right, a lot of AI tools coming into play that can, because AI and machines are so good at looking at large volumes of data, doesn't get tired, right? It can sort of consistently look at this information and identify trends and identify, anomalies, things like that. We have these AI tools that are designed to help the payroll administrator really be more effective, right, at and efficient in using their time to focus them towards, what are the things that they need to be paying attention to in that moment for that payroll, right? Whatever sort of duration that might take place. It might be 3 days before, sort of payroll Tuesday, or for you, right? Like on that Friday before, we've already identified some anomalies with some of the new hire data that has been collected, or we've identified some potential transactions that you might want to look at. Hey, there was a direct deposit change that looked unusual. Here's a social security number that doesn't look like it's in the right format, right? These are things that they could be correcting, looking at, identifying, fixing, all sort of throughout, so that you're not waiting till the check goes out, direct deposits hit, and then you go, oh my gosh, there was a mistake with that. We can identify those things early, help correct that up front. So again, that is helping the payroll administrator sort of be more efficient, effective during their week. But at the end of the day, we're helping to make sure that the paycheck is correct and it goes to the right place at the right time, which is that employee experience aspect of it as well. And then, to connect that back to sort of the employer side. I mean, improved employee experience, improved compliance and risk reduction. You're talking about sort of helping both sort of that retention risk aspect of sort of a reduced employee experience, but also reducing that financial risk aspect of getting things wrong on payday. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of sort of things that are, I think, converging, that's really helping to advance this conversation around the employee experience of payroll. And so, like, perhaps, since not since sort of the early days of employee self-service, as I got to experience again, as long as I've been in this business, have we seen sort of this kind of a leap in that opportunity.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And you bring up a lot of good points again. Um, One of the things that I'm curious, it's interesting to think, right? Because, again, I mean, I guess it does serves the employer's interest to make sure that the employee's pay is correct before disbursement happens, because otherwise, and that's sort of the result. I could see maybe 20, certainly 30 years ago, where there might not have been as much of a sort of a drive to make sure that we got this right, because there was less choice back then, maybe less sort of we were in a lower consciousness frequency, maybe not to get too woo woo here, but around payroll, right? And and so today that's elevated so employers understand, yeah, hey, if I get this pay wrong and this happens to be a high performer of mine, then we're we're up the creek here,
That's
because
right.
they might leave, and that's going to cost us a lot of money, and so it's an avoidable cost.
Yeah, I mean, and when we think about sort of again, sort of all these things sort of colliding here at once, I mean, think of, the organizations who over the course of the last 5 years post-pandemic, where, employees, they found their employees relocating to sort of places that they hadn't been. Like, again, thinking 20 years ago, right? Everyone worked in an office. We all sort of clocked in, so to speak, whether right, and we all just we got paid for the hours, right? And so there's this idea, right, that payroll as well. It's just sort of arithmetic, right? Hours times rate equals gross, and subtract some, do some tax calculations. But now, if you think about this sort of dispersed workforce, these hybrid or remote workforces, where that person lives and works, if you have a remote employee, you're subject as an employer to the labor laws of that state and the tax obligations of that state. So, all of a sudden, when maybe you were an organization, you had say an office in, Illinois, where I live, and traditionally everyone was coming into the office, lived and worked in Illinois, but now over the course of the last couple of years, I found someone now lives in Michigan. What is that implication of sort of that sort of mobile or digital nomad type workforce? How does that impact, right, that employee experience? Well, the employee wants to live in Michigan. They're able to be super productive in Michigan, but now as an employer, I have to abide by those tax laws and the labor laws in Michigan. So, I mean, that's something that didn't happen on the norm for a lot of organizations until a few years ago. And it's a reality that many sort of organizations are having to deal with today. If processes and AI that can see and understand, hey, this person just moved to Michigan, we got to start taxing them in Michigan, right? And be able to do that sort of automatically and or alert the right people and say, hey, here's now you got to go set up some changes to your tax tables, things like that, be able to raise those to the right people, keep sort of be able to pay them and make sure that they remain engaged and connected and not sort of fall into something where, hey, at the end of the year they go file their taxes and they realize, oh, I have this massive tax burden because my employer hasn't been withholding my taxes correctly, right? I think these are the kinds of things that you can impact with uh, payroll systems, right? That can improve that employee experience.
Yeah, yeah, a real cornucopia of things that you can do within the payroll system to 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 improve that employee experience, to be proactive about it, to get the employee noticing it, more often than just when payroll goes wrong, um, and there's so much that can happen, and as exciting as this other stuff is around the payment side of things and fintech. I think that the main point here is that I was hoping that we would be able to really impart on the audience, and we did. Thank you so much. Is that there's so much that can be done within the purview of payroll itself, to improve that experience. Because again, payroll is ground zero for the employee experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. It is, it is that touch point every 2 weeks, every, 15 days, whatever your pay frequencies for some folks, yeah, every week. Um, it's that constant, consistent touch point that employees have with their employers. They viscerally feel that connection to the employer on payday.
Oh, you brought up three great words: constant, and visceral. What was the other one? It was
Uh,
consistent.
yeah,
Yeah,
consistent.
constant, consistent, and visceral. You're absolutely right about that. Payroll's got to be all three of those things, and it is. Yutaka, thank you so much for appearing on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
I appreciate it, Brent. I always enjoy our conversations.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at hr.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.